Yeah. Healthcare Before Medicare. The Affordable Care Act. Premiums. Deductibles. Co-pays. That's what we're talking about today. Welcome to the Retirement Answerman Show. My name is Roger Whitney. I'm your host. This is the show dedicated not just to help you survive retirement. We want you to thrive in retirement. We also want you to be able to afford healthcare before Medicare. And that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, let's turn that down. Hey, we got to make healthcare as interesting as we can because we got to pay attention to it because it's important. And it's very easy to get tired head when you're evaluating your options, which I am doing right now. You heard last week, my wife, she quit her job. And also, not only did we lose her income, but we lost our health insurance. So we are now in that healthcare before Medicare because this doesn't just affect retirees. It affects self-employed people, which I am one of those. So what we're going to do today is in our Hot Topics segment, we're going to talk a little bit about ACA, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. I'm going to share with you some examples, and I'm also going to share with you the estimate that I got for my family and talk a little bit about that and maybe where there's some planning opportunities. And then in our practical planning segment, we are blessed that a super nerd listener and his wife, Keith and Linda, reached out. They're retired. They've already walked this, and Keith has done some very interesting research for his family, and he's going to share that journey with us as well. But you know what? We can't do any of that until we have that all-important disclaimer. All right, here's the deal. Don't take advice from me on this show. I only give advice to clients that I'm a fiduciary for. If you want to be a client, go to rogerwhitney.com. Let's set up a fit meeting and we can see if we're a fit. But until that time, think of this as helpful hints and education. And before you make any decisions, talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor, because that's just common sense. Now, as an addition to that, I am not an expert in healthcare. It's not what I do. I understand it may be more than most, but I am not an expert. So I'm on this journey with you. I am also not a tax consultant. We'll be talking about some taxable things here, but I don't give tax advice, so talk to your CPA about that. Now let's get on and let's talk about this ACA, Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act is always in the news, and when I hear it, you know what I think about? I think about Laurel and Hardy. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Man, ACA is a mess. I'm not talking about because of how it was originally designed. I'm just talking about the whole political football. We don't know what the rules are going to be. And rather than really dive deep into what could happen, let's talk about what we're dealing with. So if you are retired or self-employed and you're needing health insurance because you haven't reached Medicare yet, obviously, you got to at least look at the Affordable Care Act, ACA, or Obamacare. Now, what it established was a health insurance exchange, state by state, and then there's also a federal government exchange if there are no exchanges in the state, where you go through and health insurers are part of it. And all the plans in the ACA have some essential benefits. So generally, you're given a bronze category, a silver category, and a gold category based on how robust they are. But some of the benefits are, if you're parents of adult children up to age 26, you can include them in your plan. So you can cover your kids, your young adult kids. If anyone gets sick, the insurance can't drop them from the plan or limit how much insurance the family uses, which could be huge depending on what's going on with your family. If anybody's chronically ill, a new insurance company can't deny coverage. They can't deny coverage for pre-existing conditions or exclude them, which could be very important, especially in your 50s and 60s, right? We got a little wear and tear on our body. We probably have some pre-existing conditions. Insurance companies can't raise premiums without approval of state governments. Now, I read a recent article that said a number of insurers have requested double-digit premium increases for 2018. And based on initial filing for the benchmark Silver plan, they range from lowering premiums by 5% to raising them by almost 50%. So it's all over the board. But they have to get state approval. Companies, the insurance companies, must spend at least 80% of their premiums, the money that they get paid, on providing actual medical services or paying for medical services. And I'm assuming that's designed so they don't spend all their money on advertising and not actually deliver on what they say they're going to do. The ACA covers mental health treatment, lab tests, outpatient care, emergency services, hospitalization. So it's pretty robust in what its promise is. Now, you go through the premiums, and we're going to dive into some examples here, but it's the Affordable Care Act. One of the intents of the act was to offer affordable insurance to people that normally can't afford it, insuring the uninsured. So what the government set up, or the ACA set up, is something, government tax credits or a subsidy for people based on income levels. And this has become a little problematic in the retirement planning space, and we'll talk about that. But my understanding is that your income can be no more than 400% of the federal poverty level in order to receive subsidies. So as of 2017, I don't know what the 18 numbers are, that means your income, if you're single, can be no more than $48,240. So if you have income below that, you're going to get some kind of subsidy, it looks like. And if you're married, if your income is below $98,400 for a family of four, and this is most states. It does vary state by state and urban, suburban. But if you have income below those thresholds, you get some subsidy to help cover the payments. And again, we're going to dive into that. So what ends up happening is they look at modified adjusted gross income. So what you're expecting to have is based off of MAGI. So let's talk real quick about what's included in that number. So what's included as income when you're estimating what your income is going to be for this subsidy? Well, it's wages, tips, self-employment income, that's net self-employment income, unemployment compensation, Social Security disability, retirement and pension income. Here's something that could be really important. That includes withdrawals from IRAs and 401ks. Doesn't include qualified distributions from a Roth account. Alimony, child support, capital gains are included. Investment income, that's going to include dividends earned and other types of interest you receive, rental and royalty income, foreign income. So a lot of these things get included in what they say is your modified adjusted gross income. So that's going to be important to know, because let's talk about what is not included or what can be deductions from what you expect. So you have expenses like alimony, IRA contributions can help, educational expenses, moving expenses, student loan interest, tuition costs. All these types of things can help you offset some of those income sources that we're talking about. And this can be interesting when we're thinking about how do we plan from an income tax level. So if you are planning on retiring and need to get health insurance, and you, from the prism of the subsidies, and you'll see how important this could be, if all of your assets are in tax-deferred accounts, and that's where you're planning on drawing your money to provide for your lifestyle prior to 65, well, those withdrawals are going to be counted in calculating how much of a subsidy you get with the ACA. And the majority of people that you run into have almost all of their assets in tax-deferred accounts through IRAs, 401ks, all the normal things that we've had, right? Well, that could really bite you if you need that money before age 65 from a healthcare subsidy standpoint. Now, if you notice, if you have after-tax assets, You can use those and draw those monies down and preserve IRA assets, and that may help you control what your modified adjusted gross income is. And also, if you have Roth assets, now this is an interesting conundrum, if that's the word I'm looking for. Generally we think of Roth assets as the last assets we want to touch because all of the growth is tax-free, right? So we want to give it a lot of time to allow it to grow, because when we take it out, there's no taxes. But if you have substantial Roth assets, there may be an opportunity to use those because qualified distributions from those don't count as income. So that's a conundrum. What do we do? I think that's something that needs to be looked at from a planning perspective. But I think one big thing that we all can take away from a balance sheet diversification standpoint is it makes sense to have not just tax-deferred assets, but after-tax assets, because that can give you more options and might be able to help you prior to Medicare. Now, how do you enroll in the ACA? Well, there are enrollment periods. So the enrollment period ended for 2018, but they have special enrollment periods if certain things happen. So what are those certain things? Number one is life changes. So if you got married, you had a baby, you adopted a kid, you got divorced or legally separated, or you had someone die, you have 60 days of a special enrollment period to apply and get health care if any one of those events happened. If you have change in residence, if you move to a new home in a new zip code or county, or you move back from a foreign country, or you had a student coming home from college, those can trigger a special enrollment period so you can apply for coverage. Or if you had a loss of health insurance, you lost your job, the company no longer offers it, those type of things. This is what I'm in, right? My wife quit her job. So not only did we lose our income, we lost the healthcare benefit. And I'm going to share with you my estimates for ACA. And I may need to take a pill for this. But anyway, you have 60 days. So my wife and I, our family, we have 60 days from the loss of coverage to apply for ACA and get accepted, or to sign up for that. And after those 60 days, then our special enrollment period is gone, and we'll have to figure that out. So I did some examples. So let's look at a couple. Before we look at my situation, let's look at a husband and wife, age 55, and let's assume their modified adjusted gross income is $100,000. And I'm going to assume they live right where I live in Texas. So if couple age 55, 100,000 income, living in Texas, same state I do. If we're going to look at the silver plan, which is sort of the benchmark plan, their estimated premiums, monthly premiums, are $1,660 per month. Wow. The individual deductible is $3,500. The family deductible is $7,000. Max out of pocket is $7,350 per individual, $1,470 for the family. So that's what you would pay. If you looked at the bronze plan, which I'm not going to go through the details, it was like $1,452 a month. And the gold plan was $1,920 a month. But the silver is, I think typically what people look at. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for those kind of deductibles. It's $3,500 per person. So let's look at the same plan, but assume that their reported income isn't $100,000. Let's say it's $75,000. Their premium would go from $1,660 a month to $1,450 a month. So a change, not huge, but a change. Now let's take that one step further. Same couple, age 55. Their income isn't $100,000. It's not $75,000. Let's call it $50,000. So their original payment was $1,660 a month for a silver plan at $75,000 in income. And I'm just using the calculator on healthcare.gov, which is the official site of the ACA. And as an aside, I think the website had lots of issues. Originally, it's a great website. Anyway, so the same couple having reportable income of $50,000 goes from all the way from almost $1,700 a month down to same silver plan, $354 a month. So Do you think how you manage your reportable income matters when you're looking at healthcare? Yeah, it does. So if you have a lot of after-tax assets, I'm just thinking now, if you have a lot of after-tax assets and you choose to use those rather than take out of a tax-deferred account, you could save $1,200, $1,300 a month in premiums. If you are self-employed and you manage your net income, you could save $1,300, $1,400 a month. If you have income but you contribute to IRAs because you're able to, because you have after-tax assets, it could save you a lot of money every single year. And just for kicks, I put in that I lived in Georgia. I just picked a random zip code in Georgia, and the silver plan for a couple 55 at $100,000 a year income was about $1,572 a month. And then if I change the income again, let's say we go from, I'm just doing this right here, from 100,000 to 75. I just want to see if there's a huge difference just by choosing income. And this is just totally random. Then the silver plan, not a big difference, about $1,400 a month for the silver. But you'll see in our discussion, it could make a difference where you live. So now let's move from just a fictitious couple. Let's look at my family. So I'm 51 and my wife is 50. I'm sorry, about the same age. And we have two kids, Spencer and Emma, who are 20 and 21. So we got to cover them because they're in college and doing their thing. And I don't qualify for any subsidies. So I look at let's see here. The silver plan for my family is $2,154 per month. Okay, let me pick myself up. That's for the silver plan with a family deductible of $13,000. Now, I can remember back in like 2000 when my wife wasn't working and the kids were young, we had a $10,000 deductible HSA qualified plan. And I think our premiums were like $480 a month. So my wife and I and my family, we're looking at $2,154 per month. The estimated annual cost is $32,480. Holy cow. So next week, we're going to explore the Medishare arrangements, and I'm going to share my discovery for myself, and we're going to talk to a rep from the largest Medishare organization. And then in the week after that, we're going to explore alternatives, COBRA, working part-time and things like that. But what I want to do right now is in the practical planning segment, I want to talk with Keith and Linda and get their insights because I thought they had a lot of really good wisdom that we all can learn from. So let's go talk to Keith and Linda. So Keith and Linda, I am very happy that you reached out to me via email to share your thoughts because you guys have been on this Healthcare Before Medicare journey.
That's right. That's right.
Very exciting, right?
Yeah, exciting. And it was very difficult to narrow it down to a definitive solution. And it remains to be very changing in the future as well. So that's sort of the mantra for taking healthcare is wait another 6 months and you can reevaluate and see what your new choices are.
Right. And so, Keith, you're 58 and Linda, you're 53. So this
Correct.
is an important issue because you are retired, right?
Right. Yes. December 1st was my last official day working at the company. I worked 35 years at one company.
And what I liked about we had some conversations outside of the podcast. And what I liked about your journey on it is Keith has an engineering background and
Right.
You did some analysis on it to whatever level you were comfortable with. Because I think what happens, I don't know with your network or not, but a lot of people just sort of take a guess because you get tired head doing this if you're not naturally analytical.
Well, that's true. And the challenging thing with healthcare is, as I said, I'm a spreadsheet guy, but the answer provided by the spreadsheet isn't necessarily give you the comfort level that you're looking for when selecting healthcare. It's an emotional decision. There's significant consequences to getting it wrong. So in my effort to reduce it to a spreadsheet was part of the answer. but it can't be the entire answer.
Right. Some of it is intuitive because we all have different levels of and philosophies about how much we self-insure and how much we pass on to someone else and where our pain point is on premiums and things like that.
Well, that's true. And then there's also most of us come from a background where we've had healthcare provided by our employer, and our copays are just, you never really see them because they're taken out in advance of your take-home paycheck. And it's sort of not front and center much. And the programs, if you're working at a large employer, they're really nice. They're gold or platinum plans. Many people have. So it really doesn't occupy a lot of space for many, many years until you're like, wow, that's going to end soon. And then you have to go out and try to recreate that or some substitute for that. And it can be daunting.
Yeah. And
especially, since the ACA. Yeah.
Yeah. And the terminology is weird, and the ratios of copays and maximums and in-network, out-of-network. I mean, holy cow.
Right.
It's just complicated.
And selecting the in-network, out-of-network was a significant issue for us because for years both Linda and I had our doctors we liked, and then we were really forced to pay significantly more to keep them, disproportionately more to keep them, versus a more economic plan that was just as good, but you couldn't keep their doctor. And those are the kind of choices. And you're like, well, how much do I really value the doctor? And you think you have this wonderful relationship with them, but really you only see them once or twice a year. So it's those kinds of things that you really have to process and try to value when you're narrowing these choices down.
So I want to do two things today. One is I want to get a baseline from a philosophical perspective of how you guys think of it. And then I want to talk about ACA and your journey through that. So from a baseline perspective, philosophically, were you looking, to keep your doctors and have that maintain those relationships? Or are I would rather self-insure as much as I can and then just have the big stuff taken care of if it happens? How do you guys think about that kind of risk transfer?
Yeah, I was having, I'll say, a balanced view on that. I knew, maybe I couldn't keep my doctors. I mean, I had been investigating this for maybe 2 years prior to my retirement. So I was following the Affordable Care Act and going to their website, healthcare.gov, and modeling my scenarios and seeing the doctors. And so I was sort of, really becoming very familiar with it, which I highly recommend because it's very complex and there's a lot of moving parts and they're changing all the time. And once you just spend time on that website, and you can really start to see, get some clarity with the choices that you have. But you're right. It comes down to convenience, familiarity with what you had. And just for my particular case, that was going to cost a significant amount of money over different plans that had similar copays and deductibles and whatnot, but had different networks of doctors. It seems like if there was a frustrating thing to it all, there were many networks of doctors, and I couldn't just get all my doctors in a single plan or network.
You'd have like these three, but that was good. Yeah.
And so I had to make that decision. I'm like, okay, well, and then along the way, you mentioned self-insure. I had a year prior to retirement, I had a relatively simple arthroscopic knee surgery. So I use that as an example, or as I'm like, okay, well, I got my wonderful insurance to work, and I called up the doctor, I called up the hospital, and I said, I want a quote on what this is going to cost. And it was a formidable task for them to provide a number. And I finally got it. And many of the people I talked to were unable to. They were like, wow, we just never really heard of anybody call and want to quote for this up front. I'm like, yeah, with and without insurance. If I just walk in there with my credit card, what is this going to cost? And you have the anesthesiologist, and you have the hospital, the operating room, and you have the doctor, and you have the follow-up visit. And so it was after all of that and obtaining the numbers, I'm like, well, this isn't so bad. I mean, it was sort of like make fun of it, major car repair kind of price. So I'm like, well, that's, really what I want is health insurance just to cover if things really go bad, can sink my financial boat. And that's sort of where I'm headed in the future here, is to just have a plan that has relatively minimal coverage until things really go bad. Because I'm now comfortable with making, shopping and making good purchasing decisions for everyday life in the medical world.
And you hit on something from just the way the system is structured. They're structured to deal with insurance companies. I remember when I think it was an MRI actually for a knee. This was some time ago, the last time my wife wasn't working. And I get out of the doctor's office and she gives me a script to go to the MRI place. And I'm like, well, I pay cash. And she says, oh, this one's going to be like $1,900 for the MRI. I'm like, whoa. And then as soon as she really realized I was just paying cash, she sent me to a different MRI place and it was like $580. And
exactly.
Well,
I had the same exact experience.
We talked about this. Why would you not send me there even if it was for insurance? Because it's so much cheaper, but that's not how it's structured.
That's right. It's funny you say that because I had the same experience. I was scheduled like December 29th for an MRI on my knee. And then they called me the day of. They're like, the MRI machine broke. You got to come January 2nd. And I'm like, okay. So then in my mind, I'm like, well, wait a minute. It's a new year. I wonder if they raised their prices. Sure enough, they doubled the price from about $1,700. So $1,700 to $3,400. So I called them back on January 2nd. I'm not coming up. You doubled the price. They're like, oh, yeah, well, that's the way it is. And I'm like, well, I'm not coming. So I got online and I called around and I got an MRI for $495.
So this is what we deal with. So, Linda, let me ask you a question, Linda, because I'm going to guess that some people listening, because Keith thought this out. He was thinking about his healthcare choice a few years in advance and doing his analysis in a much deeper level than probably most. Absent Keith, would you have done the same analysis?
No, because I don't operate the same way as he does. I'm a much more emotional person. So it's been great that he's done all the research to show me, because I don't think I would even touch the idea of some of the, this doctor's out of the network and we'll just pay to go. And just the way he shops around and all that, I never would think to do that. I'm just so much well, you have a plan and that's what you stick with. So it kind of makes me think out of the box by being married to my husband. So, which is great.
I mean, actually calling and getting a quote as a test on the surgery he done, that's due diligence. And I think most people are more towards how you think, Linda, in that this is such a foreign environment, first off, and we don't have the engineer mind per se, that it's more of, looking at it and gut, right? And that at some point there is a diminishing returns on the analysis part, right, Keith? But it's interesting.
Yes. So you can get an analysis paralysis, I call it, and then it becomes, there's a level of detail that doesn't provide you any more confidence. So I agree with that.
Well, so let's pivot and let's talk about your experience and thoughts on ACA. You went through that process, and how was that for you experience-wise? And then what did you discover?
The ACA's website, if you spend some time on it at healthcare.gov, it's very informative, but it's like any other website. You need to spend time to try to find the answers. During the application process, because I'm a 58, retired, have no W-2 income, and also I'm too young to collect Social Security, or I don't have a pension. And so it became, the questions they would ask were not structured for that type of scenario. So I did have to reach out and talk to them and say, how do I fill in and estimate my income? And they were very helpful with that. They chose not to, but they said you may be asked to provide supporting documentation, which would be, I'd have to show them my bank account balances and how I'm invested and how I was going to withdraw money. So that was probably the most uncharted water, meaning their questionnaire and the application process isn't set up for early retirees. Just say that. Relative to presenting the plans, the bronze, silver, gold, the networks, the doctors, the drugs, you can load all your prescriptions and you can pick your doctors, and you can spend hours, as I did, trying to draw a circle around all my doctors and find a plan that covers it. And for me, it ultimately I couldn't get what I wanted. I had to sacrifice, in my case, some doctors for a less expensive plan. And so far it's worked out. The new doctors are very nice. And so I can't say it's had any consequence. The other thing was it's called the PTC, the Premium Tax Credit. And this is key. So for retired couple, the maximum modified adjusted gross income can be, I think, $64,950, something like that. If you make $1 more than that, you lose, it's called the premium tax credit cliff. You go to zero tax credit, meaning a sort of a subsidy that you would get. So you have to be very careful throughout the year when you're pulling money out of your accounts, and that you do not go over your planned income. Can have a huge effect on your premiums. For my particular case here in the Midwest, it's $665 a month. The premium is reduced. I'm considering moving to a western state, a mountain state, and that same exact information, my personal information, I put it in their state's website, and it comes out, I get a premium of $2,019 a month. Now, the net premium, yeah, it's crazy. So the issue is you really have to plan your income and stick to it, because if you divert off that, it will all be reconciled in your federal tax return, and it can have a very big impact on your finances.
And then income, we're talking about modified adjusted gross income, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And to be more specific, it's close to the number on the bottom of the first page on your 1040. But for the Affordable Care Act, they make some small revisions to it. And I can't remember what they are, but directionally correct. It's that it's your income minus some of your IRA deductions. And if you did an HSA, that would be deducted and whatnot.
So, and then talk about so obviously where you live and managing that income level is critical because it can be drastic. So has that influenced your choice on where you're going to domicile?
It has. And let me just back up 1 second. That doesn't mean, just to be clear, it's like, oh, I can't live at, let's say you do your budget and you want $100,000 a year income. Well, you can do that. This is taxable income.
Right.
So if you had pulled out $50,000 out of your Roth IRA or Roth 401k, that's not taxable income. You're free to do that. It has no effect with the Affordable Care Act premium tax credit. So this is taxable income. So just to be clear about that you're not recording all of your income, only taxable income. So yes, moving to more rural counties in different states has a big impact on the premium tax credit, the PTC. That's what I found is if you're in an area there's a big city, there's a big pool of people, there's a lot of competition between the insurance companies and the rates are down. But if you move out into the country, you're really stuck with maybe one choice. I'm generalizing quite a bit here. In my case, there's one choice. Fortunately, it was Anthem, which is, got a wide national network, so that's good. But, for a bronze lowest budget plan, it's $2,400 a month. So all of a sudden that $2,019 a month premium tax credit, if I get that wrong, it's a $24,000 mistake. So I really need to make sure that if we go to this, that the math is correct.
So Linda, do you have tired head already? I do a little bit, and I think about this stuff.
It really does make that, like, I look at the budget differently now, like, okay, we have to be under the $64,000 mark so that we can have the subsidy kicking in, blah, blah, blah. But, it has been empowering, though, to see, that we can be in charge of our spending and be more careful. And, now that we're in the second half of our life, we don't really need stuff anyway. So it's been really empowering to see how that all fits together. It's like a puzzle, how it's all working. But yeah, I'm really glad that Keith does the strategizing.
Yeah, and I'm not. That wasn't a comment on you because I think you're more normal than Keith. Not that Keith is weird in any way. I thank God he makes people like Keith and Carl and other people. But I think most people don't get to that level of detail, especially with stuff like this, because like you said, Keith, we're used to not having to deal with it or even think about it. So we're not as analytical, many people. So this is a big deal. While you were talking, I was just playing around on healthcare.gov because I live in a zip code that is on the border of a county. There's 2 counties in it. And I'm maybe a half mile away from a much, much more rural county. And so I just ran it saying exact same information, except one I lived in that county, and then the other one I live in the county I live in. And the difference was about $300 a month in premium.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And we have the same thing. I've been experienced playing around on the modeling different places. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and it all feels like it's going to be very fluid because who knows what it's going to be like next year.
Right. Do I move a half a mile and then next year it wouldn't have mattered? And then, yeah, exactly. And that is.
And then one other point is, so if we move, we're planning on moving mid-year this year, and then if we're working through our deductible here in the Midwest, and all of a sudden we move out to a different state, all that resets to zero, and you start all over again. You don't get to keep your position in the race. You go back to the beginning and start all over. So that plays a role if you were going to have some kind of major surgery or an expense, and you were also going to move. It plays a big role in it.
And then, potentially we'll have the ability to buy cross-border if anything gets passed. But you're right. I mean, it's not just fluid in the next 5 years. It's really the next 6 months, maybe. Who knows?
That's right.
So let's sum up your ACA experience. Sum up the critical things that people need to consider. You talked about them, but let's get them so we can sum up this part of the conversation.
That the use of it, I've been using it for 2 months. It's working well. The doctors and the billing have worked well. We've each gone to 2 doctor visits. You've gone to one. And we've got a handful of prescriptions. It's all working very well. That their website is very comprehensive and full of information. When I discussed with them, it was very, they were helpful and trained well. It is probably equivalent in terms of when you apply to doing your 1040 with Schedule A deductions. It's that intensive. And so that would be the equivalent. So you want to sit down for a few hours and plan for that amount of time to answer a lot of questions.
So the insurance works well. So that's one, right?
In the end, it works well because you're not buying insurance from the Affordable Care Act. Ultimately, they're just a broker,
exactly,
a federal broker, and you end up with a regional or local health insurance company that covers your county. And so once the whole application's done and you're approved, then you're handed off to this insurance company, and that's who I pay my monthly bill to, and that's where I get my statements from. So it ends up just like it was when I was with my employer-sponsored plan.
Okay. And so I have a question real quick. As you were going through this, did you have the option for COBRA off of your employer plan? And do you remember what the cost might have been?
Yes, that's a very good question, and I did. And it was exceedingly expensive. So in my particular case, well, I don't know, exceeding is a relative term, but for the two of us, it would have been about $1,700 a month to keep the plan that I had. And so I considered that to be too expensive. It is a wonderful plan. And if I suppose you had a lot of medical needs and you were consuming a lot of health care, then that's a good choice. But it wasn't our situation. And you do not get any premium tax credits if you select COBRA. It's just, the federal government is left out of that scenario. So, for example, if your income was going to be more and you were never going to qualify for the premium tax credits, COBRA may be a very good answer because you can keep your same doctor network. It feels the same. You just have to pay. Basically, the formula is you pay what the company's portion was paying on your behalf,
right,
plus 2%. So they hit you with a little administrative fee there. So your whatever was being taken out of your paycheck, which is usually about, the company was paying 2/3. I was paying 1/3. So I got to absorb their 2/3, and then they hit a 2% fee on top of that.
Okay. So number one is the insurance in the ACA. Once you have it, you're dealing with the insurance company, so it feels like what you normally would deal with. Two is,
that's right.
And I'm trying to sum up the bigger lessons. The second is you really got to pay attention to income thresholds because that can have a big impact.
Yes. And I would say that if you're going to be over that threshold, then you probably don't even want to consider the ACA. And that's why I think 85% of the people on ACA participate in the premium tax credits because there's really no reason to do it if you're not.
Okay. And we'll get to the other options here in a minute.
Yeah.
And then obviously where you live, whether it's rural or urban, and from a state perspective, can have an impact.
A significant impact, yes.
Okay. Significant impact. Any last thoughts on the ACA?
Well, and it all changes next year. I guess that's, so. So whatever we just said, it's good for another 8 months, 10 months, and then we do it all over again.
So we'll put an expiration stamp of any day now.
Any day now. That's right.
Hey, welcome to the Happy Lab, where we're going to get down on being happy. Did you like that music at the beginning of the episode, Nicole?
You are so silly. I love it.
So Nicole and I were chatting about how do we work in a happy lab with the Affordable Care Act. And what did we decide?
I don't think there is a happy lab to be found there.
So you, for Lent, are giving up what?
I'm calling it fasting from my cell phone
And
in the evenings.
how's that going? Are you making you happier?
I think it's actually making me a lot happier. At first, it was sort of difficult because I realized I was so used to, responding to people's texts or looking up things, just browsing on it. And those first few days were hard, but it's just a relief to not feel like on call to people in the evenings and actually focus on my husband and my kids and interacting with them. And it's been really nice.
So a lot happier.
A lot.
I noticed with my wife, since she's quit her work, that she doesn't have her phone and that furrowed brow. Is that the way you say it? Furrowed? There you go. Furrowed. I can't pronounce it. That brow of, dealing with stuff. And I'm definitely seeing it with her too. So put your phone down and go be happy. Now let's go set a smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
Welcome to the Smart Sprint segment where we set a 7-day goal to take a baby step to having a awesome retirement, to rock retirement. So again, sort of like the Happy Lab, Nicole, I don't know what kind of Smart Sprint you set with ACA, but as I've been exploring this, because we need healthcare, one thing I've realized is being healthy saves you money, especially as you get older. The more medications you cannot be on, the less pre-existing conditions that are self-inflicted. So I think that the sprint in the next 7 days is, even if you're not having to deal with healthcare before Medicare, what's one step you can take in the next 7 days to take control of your health?
I think that's a good one. That could be as simple as drink more water.
Or standing more, or getting your 10,000 steps in. The point is, in the next 7 days, you can do something. You can do one thing to live healthier, which is probably going to make you happier and most likely going to save you a lot of money on healthcare. So, Nicole, on this show that I've done for 4 years, I'm usually pretty bashful about saying, hey, we accept clients that we can work with. So if you are looking to walk life with an advisor into retirement and you're trying to deal with all the issues that we talk about and you want a framework and you want to have someone in your corner, go to rogerwhitney.com, click Work with Roger, and let's set up a meeting to see if we're a good fit. Can't say it any more plain than that. I always get accused of never saying it, so I wanted to make that clear. We are accepting the clients and we want it to be a good fit. So go check that out if you're looking to have someone in your corner.
I don't know why you're bashful about saying that.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.